Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa used his weekly newsletter to call for an immediate end to acts of war. The president says reconciliation and peace are possible if there is a rather demonstrable political will from all sides. Let's bring in now John Stremlau, an international relations expert. And in his opinion piece, Professor Stremlau says that South Africa's offer to mediate should not be ignored. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Stremlau, and a very warm good morning to you. Why do you say so? Why should this call for South Africa to mediate be important not to ignore?
For several reasons, the most important of which is that the South Africans have historically been allied with the Palestinians, have their back, so to speak, the way that Biden does for the Israelis. And it just happens that South Africa also has very good relationships, friendly relationships with the U.S. and with the Europeans, so that the South African credibility is a good backstop for a process if it were to unfold. But unfortunately, we don't have leaders that are willing to take ownership and take risks for peace on either the Israeli side or the Palestinian side as yet. But there is a growing international support for ending the apartheid-like circumstances in the West Bank and Gaza, and that might just push for a two-state solution.
I mean, you know, with regards to the war, it seems like sides have naturally been taken here by different regions around the world, Prof. And I just wonder, because when the president, showed solidarity with Palestine, that wasn't met very much well from the Western side, right? Let's talk about some of those repercussions as well, and some of the, different regions around the world, but also different organizations calling out the president. And he was obviously speaking for peace, but it seems like not everyone welcomed his statements and sentiments.
Well, there is an awful lot of noise that is necessary and probably understandable around the terrible conflict. The horrors of Hamas's invasion of Israel are being matched right now by the horrors of the bombing and attacks against the little small area, overcrowded area of Gaza by the Israelis. So everyone is scoring political points right now. Let us not forget that war is politics by other means. That's a cliche, but it certainly holds. And right now, what we desperately need is for politics to be preeminent. A lot of the politics go on behind the scenes in diplomacy. And so we just have to keep our ears to the ground and have these conversations, but not rush to conclusions, except that the civilians desperately need to be protected and to be alleviated from their horrible conditions within Gaza right now.
Yeah. And Prof, when there is politics involved instead of mediation for a ceasefire, what are the consequences?
Well, the politics have to play out, and right now, President or Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to think that the Israeli public that holds him accountable is demanding revenge, but revenge for the dead doesn't protect the living, and the necessity is really to have the politics guide a process of peace, which is possible, I believe, because it almost was pulled off in the 1990s, as I say in the article, but it has been elusive now, up until now, but at least the Hamas attack against the terrible attack against the Israeli civilians was a wake-up call.
How would you also rate other world leaders, Prof, in terms of their calls with regards to what they think needs to be done to stop this conflict between Hamas and Israel? I mean, when we compare to what Cyril Ramaphosa is saying in his weekly newsletter around South Africa putting forward an offer to mediate, how would you compare him and his statements to other world leaders? So far, what has stood out for you in terms of international calls and statements being made so far regarding the conflict?
Well, as you know, in that article, I alluded to his critical role that then private citizen Ramaphosa played with the Finnish former president Matti Ahtisaari, the late Matti Ahtisaari. And it was a critical but secondary role after the local leaders evinced a capacity to work out a solution. Then you had to monitor that agreement. So that right now, I think for South Africa, the fact that the government has taken a position in support of civilian welfare and recalling the historical ties that we have here with the aspirations for freedom and self-determination of the Palestinian people is enough. I mean, everyone knows that South Africa is partisan, but it's a partisan for a purpose, and the purpose is to get a two-state solution. So there's not much more you can do right now, and the unfortunate thing or fortunate thing, I mean, it depends on where you sit, but my accent is that Biden is the dominant figure in at least getting this process going, and I suspect he talked very tough to Bibi Netanyahu about not pushing too much into the destruction of the civilians in Gaza, but whether Netanyahu is going to listen to Biden remains to be seen.
Well, we'll have to wait and see, as you mentioned, Prof, as to how exactly he will react to Biden. Also, we understand the U.S. president making his way to Israel to visit the region. Professor John Stremlau, thank you so much for joining us right here on Newslink. International relations expert Prof. John Stremlau on the president's weekly newsletter regarding what should be done, of course, in situations like we're seeing between Hamas and Israel, saying that the call by South Africa to mediate should not be ignored. Quite a significant call.